What is going on YouTube? It's your boy Spanko, and today I'm back with another deck profile. Now, if you guys enjoy the deck profiles, make sure to subscribe to the channel, guys. Our goal is 5,000, and I see that 80-something% of my viewers are actually not subscribed to the channel. So if you guys enjoy the deck profiles and the other content that I do, just consider subscribing, help your boy out. Let's grow the Spanko community together. Now, for today's video, if you guys watched last week's video, I did a Trickstar deck profile. So last week I did a profile where it was focused on going first, setting up Dragoon plus a bunch of trap cards, so that this way your opponent's gonna have a hard time breaking your board, and then you can try to push for game that way. Today's profile is going to be a little bit different. Now, when I was building that deck, I was like, man, there's so many ways to play Trickstar at a competitive level nowadays, or to be as competitive as possible, I should say. And I thought, Kaijus, man. Kaijus are so good in today's metagame, as well as Nibiru, and Nibiru is kind of like in that same concept, in that same category as Kaijus. So I was like, let's make a go second Trickstar build. So this is the Trickstar Kaiju build. Now, personally, I think both of them are really good. I wouldn't pick one over the other. It really depends on your playstyle. If you like to control the board and slow down the game, then I would recommend playing the go first build with a bunch of traps. However, if you like the going second, break my opponent's board, and then try to push for game kind of OTK build, then this is the profile for you. Now, make sure to check out all the links in the description below. It includes my social media. I'm very active on Twitter, so if you guys ever want to know what's going on in the Spanko life or the Spanko community, if things are going to be late, if I have new ideas, whatever, I would love to communicate with you guys. So make sure to check the links in the description and we can interact some more. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, but like I said, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and make sure to hit that notification bell, because I noticed that a lot of the time, even people who are subscribed to me are not seeing my videos, and they're coming out like 2-3 days late, or you guys are seeing them like 2-3 days late. So to make sure you're up to date, make sure to hit that notification bell. And with that, that's all I gotta say. So enjoy the video. Okay, so off to the deck profile. Now, you guys obviously saw the going first build. Now, this is the going second build. So we are still starting off with a very simple Trickstar lineup. This is pretty much the core lineup, and that's triple Candina, triple Licorice, double Corobane, as well as one Lilybell. Now, you guys can see here I'm only playing double Corobane rather than 3 Corobane. In the other build, you really wanted to play 3 so you can get to the link 2 as fast as possible. But with this one, you don't need to get to the link 2 as fast as the other one did, just because you're not forced to make like a Verte turn 1 play. Obviously, you can do that as well still, but it's kind of one of those things where, because with the hand traps and with the Kaijus, you have a lot of opportunity to play on your opponent's turn, as well as the Phantasme as well, I should say. So you don't really need to max out on the Corobane. You just really want to play this small engine, and that's pretty much what this deck is. It's like a Trickstar engine, but it gets you to a lot of places. So I just thought this was a really cool way to play Trickstar, and I actually think this is actually a really competitive build. Now, of course, I'm not saying it's going to be meta or it's going to do anything in a competitive scene. I mean, by all means it could, right? But I just wanted to say that as competitive as possible, this is how I believe it should be built, right? So that's it for the Trickstar engine. Then for the hand traps, I'm playing double Ash as well as triple Droll and Lockbird. Now, double Ash is just something that I've been liking more and more the more I test it, just because I see that a lot of decks don't just lose to one Ash anymore. Ash is actually, funny enough, even though how strong we know it to be, it is actually not as impactful as it once was. So I realized, I was like, man, cutting into 2 is actually a good decision, because playing it at 3, you kind of want to see it first turn, like you want to see it ASAP, right? The thing is, it's not that good. I've seen a lot of decks play around, or not around, I should say, but they can play through Ash, right? So I was like, okay, well, I do want an Ash still, because I think Ash is still pretty good, but I don't want to max it out on 3 because I'd rather see some of my other hand traps. Also, seeing double Ash kind of sucks, so that's why I just decided to play it at 2. Droll and Lockbird is obviously still really important. Funny enough, obviously we know that Droll and Lock and the reincarnation is insane, but Droll and Lockbird is actually a really good card this format. Against something like Virtual World, it could be really good. Against Dragon Link, it has a pretty good matchup as well. So I don't know about matchup, but you know what I mean. Like it's a good card against Dragon Link is what I meant. But yeah, Droll and Lockbird is low-key really good and actually has a good place in the meta right now. But of course, you also have the reincarnation lock, or not lock per se, but just hand loop, I guess you could call it, with Droll. So that's really important. Triple Nibiru, because obviously, like I said, we're going second, and so Nibiru just breaks a lot of boards. But this is a Trickstar Kaiju build, which means you are still playing 4 Kaijus, 1 Jizukiru, double Gameciel, as well as 1 Humongous. The reason you're playing these 4 is because, 1, it helps you break boards going second, and then on top of that, they're really good because if you do draw into one of them, you still have a different name for the Slumber right over here, right? So that's why you do want to play 4, and you definitely want to play at least 3 different names. I know people like to play 1, 1, and 1. I'm not a huge fan of 1, 1, and 1. I like 1, 2, 1, so that's just me, and I just thought it was really good. Also, keeping this deck at 43 I think is very important, because you are playing the Red Eyes Fusion and stuff, and you don't really want to draw into these, right? Speaking of drawing into them though, Phantasme is really good for that. So if you do draw into one of these and it's kind of a brick, Phantasme does 2 things. 1, a lot of decks this format do go into link monsters, even though they're not as prevalent as they once were. Every deck really goes into either Halqifibrax or a Verite or something of that sort. So that's why I thought Phantasme was going to be really good this format. And then it does fix your hands. So usually, let's say your opponent summons like a link monster, right? You summon the Phantasme, you get to draw 2 and then shuffle 1 back, right? So if you draw like double Droll or a Nibiru, then you can shuffle back one of the Drolls, right? It can fix your hand. Or if you draw like a Red Eyes or a Dark Magician, you can also put that back as well. So Phantasme is really good in that sense because it does fix your hands. And I just thought 2 Phantasme was going to be pretty good this format. Again, Dragon Link goes into their extra deck or their link monsters. Virtual World does it. All the other decks in the meta game right now do it. I think the only one that might not do it right now is Zodiac. But other than Zoo, I'm pretty sure everything goes into link monsters. So Phantasme is really good. Of course, you could say like, okay, Eldritch doesn't go into it, Dino doesn't really go into it, but a lot of decks do go into their extra deck. And so I just thought, I'm like, okay, Phantasme is probably really good in this format. And then obviously Triple Imperm, one of the best hand traps in this format. Of course, we are talking about Calamities. That is very prevalent nowadays, and Imperm is really good against the Calamities, right? Then we're still playing the Dragoon package. I still thought the Dragoon package going second was really good because you can still make this package and it's still very impactful going second. Going second, Dragoon is a pop and it's a big monster for you. Like, there's no reason to not be playing this in my opinion. Going second, it just helps you and it sets you up that if you don't OTK your opponent, so like if you don't necessarily OTK them but you do end up breaking their board, you still end up on a Dragoon negate for your next turn, right? So that's why I think this package is really important. I still think it's really good. Then we are playing one Trickstar Light Stage. Of course, it's only at 1. We're not playing a Terraforming for it because I don't want to draw into a Light Stage and we have a dead Terraforming in deck, right? So just a Light Stage. Also, you can search it off with the Candina. So that's why, I mean, just the 1. It's also at 1. Hopefully it comes off the ban list. But yeah, just one Light Stage. Then we are playing triple Pot of Extravagance. I think this card is pretty self-explanatory. You don't go into the extra deck too much, again, outside of the Verite and Dragoon combo. So that's why Extravagance I thought was really good. And a +1 is always really good. The thing is, you're not drawing in this deck, to be honest with you. I guess the Phantasme is a draw, but you're not going to be drawing off a Phantasme at the same time you're drawing off Extravagance. So I just thought, you know, this card works super well in Trickstar in general. But before we move on, let me just say that I forgot to do something, so just give me one moment. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, we are playing one Monster Reborn. Just an extender for you. I thought this was really good. One Slumber, because going second Slumber is really good. And the thing is, if you don't necessarily have a Kaiju in hand and your opponent has like a negate, let's say, right? Let's say they have a Savage on the board. Then at least you can kind of force out the Savage with the Slumber. And at least that way it's like, okay, now I can continue playing, right? So even if Slumber doesn't necessarily resolve, Slumber is really good because it forces out negates, right? Or against those Dragon Link boards, let's say your opponent doesn't have a Savage, but they have a Buster Lock. Granted, Buster Lock doesn't do much for you, but it does get rid of technically the monster that the Buster would be equipped to. But again, most of the time it probably is equipped to a Savage, so it's just going to get the Savage negate and bait it out. Obviously, if you have a Kaiju, you don't need to worry about that, but this, if it doesn't break your opponent's board, it's gonna kind of pseudo break your opponent's board by pretty much forcing out a negate, right? One Scapegoat, I think this card is still really good. It's low key. I know it's a going second build, don't get me wrong, but I still like this card because if you can't OTK your opponent, and to be honest with you, you're not going to be able to OTK your opponent that often with this deck. You are going to be able to break their boards, and again, the reason we're playing the Dragoon package is because you break your opponent's board, and then you can set up your own board with the Dragoon, and then your opponent's going to have a really hard time playing around it, right? Because at this point, they've run out of resources, because most decks just use a lot of their resources turn 1. So the thing is, you've pretty much broken your opponent's board and then kind of set up your own. That's kind of what this deck does, right? And then if you can set a Scapegoat on top of that, that's when you get to start to really like snowball, because then you have the Link Karibo, the Link Spider and whatnot. That gets you to Boros Sword, and that's how you can OTK on your next turn, right? So that's really good. We are playing one Harpy's Feather Duster. We have no inherent back removal outside of the Feather Duster as well as the Lightning Storms. Now I should say, if you guys don't have access to Lightning Storms, I know they're expensive, it's perfectly fine. Just put in Evenly Matched. I still think Evenly Matched is pretty good in this deck because again, you don't need to attack in this deck, you don't need to OTK. The whole point of this deck is to break your opponent's board, like I said, and then set up your own board, and then this way your opponent's going to have a very hard time playing. So Lightning Storm is really good, and of course if you have your hands on Lightning Storm, definitely play it. But if you don't have your hands on Lightning Storm, it's perfectly fine. Either play Cosmic Cyclones, let's say you can put in 2 Cosmic Cyclone in here, or you can put in Evenly Matched. I'm a big fan of Evenly Matched as well still. So if you really wanted to do that, I would not be against it. I just wanted to show you guys that in a most optimal build, you would be playing Lightning Storm, but again, you don't need to. Evenly matched, Cosmic Cyclone, even Twin Twister, something like that could be really good. And then lastly, for the main deck, we are playing triple Reincarnation. I think this is also pretty self-explanatory. It's a Trickstar deck. If you summon Candina, search a Reincarnation. If you have the Reincarnation Droll lock, it's still really good, right? So even though you're going second, this is still a pretty good lock that you can still do going second, because like I said, once you break your opponent's board, you set up your own board, and then if you can set up a Reincarnation of Droll, that's insanely good. On top of that, Reincarnation, what a lot of people don't realize, or maybe I guess Trickstar players probably realize, but a lot of people look over, is the fact that if this is in your graveyard, you can banish it to special summon a Trickstar monster in your graveyard, right? So it does get these guys back to your side of the field after you've used them for something like a Verte, or if you've used them for like a Boral Sword or something, then it does get them back on your side of the field, and it does have that sort of like recurrence for you, and it does help you grind a little bit more. So Reincarnation definitely still a 3 of. Next off, for the extra deck, we are playing double Dragoons, double Verte. This is pretty self-explanatory. You are playing Extravagance, so that's why you have to play double of each, so you don't banish both of them. Of course, you still run the risk of banishing 2 of one of them or something like that. Hopefully you don't. The odds are that you really don't. I don't know the exact percentage, but the odds of banishing 2 of one of these is very low, so it's probably not going to happen. You're playing double Boral Sword, 1 Access Code, double Phoenix, double Cerberus, double Link Spider, as well as double Link Karibo. So I don't really need to explain this, because again, all of these cards go into your Boral Sword through your Scapegoat, right? Now, if you banish both your Boral Sword, that's why I'm playing the Access Code, because technically you can make Access Code instead of Boral Sword, kind of the same thing. Scapegoat does that for you still, so you can do that as well. If you really were afraid of banishing your Dragoon and your Verte, you can cut the Access Code and then cut 1 Cerberus and then play a 3rd Dragoon and a 3rd Verte. That's just another option for you, but I just wanted to show you guys that this extra deck doesn't matter too much. You're mostly just playing the Scapegoat. Now, if you guys didn't want to play the Scapegoat, I'm going to give you suggestions. If you guys don't want to play this, then you can put in Super Poly in your side deck, and then with Super Poly, you can play a bunch of Super Poly targets, right? So you can play your Mud Dragon, you can play Starving Venom. You know, technically Dragoon low-key is a Super Poly target. It probably won't really happen, but it's a Dark Magician plus a Dragon effect monster, so technically if you open a Super Poly and your opponent has like a Boral Savage on the board or something like that against Dragon Link, you can technically still Super Poly into Dragoon, because if you open your Dark Magician, it's not really going to happen, I'm going to be honest with you, but I'm just saying, like, you can play Super Poly and there are a bunch of Super Poly targets, so that's really where you want to go with this deck, because again, the extra deck is not super important. Maybe play a couple Link 2s still, because you can still make Link 2s pretty easily with the Trickstars, right? But that's it for the deck pretty much. I think this deck is very competitive for what it is, I should say, because of course, until we get Light Sage back to 3, I don't really see this deck doing too much, and because it's a combo heavy format, this deck will struggle, but that's why you play all these Kaijus, the Phantasmes, the Nibirus, the Hand Traps. You're playing all of these to combat the meta, and then you really want this deck to be as competitive as possible for today's metagame. Okay, so that's it for the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any suggestions, like I always say in every single one of my videos, let me know in the comment section down below. I love talking to you guys. I love hearing different ideas. That's how decks become better. That's how decks get good. A bunch of people with good ideas put their minds together, and boom, you guys have a competitive build. Now for me, this is what I thought through testing was going to be the most competitive and the most viable in today's format. Unfortunately, the format today is very much comprised of combo decks, so this really does help beat those combo decks. Now if the format does change to a more control-heavy format, of course, you're going to adjust the deck based off of that. But for today's metagame, this is what I thought was really good, and so I am excited and I'm happy that I could bring you guys this profile. Like I said earlier, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. All the links will be in the description below for my social medias if you want to check that out. And with that, guys, I got nothing left to say, so Spanko signing out. Peace.
My hands steady, I feel ready, but my legs heavy, I don't get it. How come I haven't hit it already? Still working, I'm still learning, I'm still searching, finally earning something, finally turning something called a profit. If I hear you talking shit, don't get caught in it. I'll be popping off and hit your ass, dropping all your shit. Yeah, I promise this, I got promises, you ain't stopping this, cross my shit.